What's going on, everybody? I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball, and join me to do just that is Justin Boone. Boone, what's going on, buddy?
Not much, man. Feeling pretty good for a Monday. I'm not going to lie. I feel like normally these shows we get started. I've even said to you before we've started a couple of these Monday shows where I just almost feel a little burnt out from trying to go over all the games from Sunday, trying to catch up on everything. But today I'm feeling pretty good. I think we're going to be all right getting through this one. And we have some interesting names that we have to go over here, including some news off the top about some quarterbacks, including a guy that I spoke plenty about before the season that I've already taken my L on. But a couple quarterbacks, couple young guys that things are changing with them.
No, we got a packed show here today. We do have the news to hit off the top. We also have the People's Panic Meter, of course. And we've got some of our favorites in the Panic Meter this week. So it's going to be a tough – I'm glad that you're feeling good. I'm also feeling good as well because I think we're going to need that to get through some difficult conversations here over the next 90 minutes of this show. But let's jump right into it here. We have a couple of news items here to talk through. First, we've got J.J. McCarthy in the concussion protocol. Kevin O'Connell said that J.J. McCarthy is in the concussion. Clarity on that, Boot. If you have that, please provide it, because sounds like our guy Max might start on Sunday in Seattle as J.J. McCarthy is in the concussion protocol. The internet's talking about soft benching. The internet's talking about, whoa, actually, Vikings wanted to get a look at Max Brosmer or Brosmer again. I'm gonna say Brosmer unless you think it's Brosmer. They've wanted to get a look. They've liked what they've seen from Brosmer. Yeah, go for it. What's his actual name?
I think it's Brosmer. I think it's Max Brosmer.
Okay,
I believe not 100%, but I believe it's Max Brosmer.
I think Brosmer sounds better, but Brosmer is probably actually correct. So whatever. All right. So Max Brosmer. The Vikings have wanted to get a look at him for quite some time. I've already seen people say, "Hey, Trey Lance, Brock Purdy situation brewing here in Minnesota." We got a long way to go before we get to that, but it sounds like we will not get J.J. McCarthy this week.
No, and we shouldn't. I mean, even if he was completely healthy, and I'm not going to speculate here whether it's a soft benching, whether they're doing this, who knows, right? We don't need to get into that. That doesn't matter for us and for fantasy. But regardless of his health situation, he probably shouldn't be playing. And it's terrible that they don't really have another guy that they can throw in there that they can feel confident in, that it was Carson Wentz for a while until Carson Wentz was basically carried out on his sword. But you just see it, right? From the players to the coaches, everyone just so frustrated there with the way the whole year's gone, right? And it's not just on McCarthy. It's the injuries to the offensive line. It's the defense really not performing in the way that we thought they would. They went out and invested in that defense. They're not playing great. Now, it doesn't help when you're not getting very stable quarterback play and then your defense is trying to pick up the pieces constantly. But you just see so much frustration from that sideline and really like a lack of confidence now from McCarthy. And I think he's trying to power through it, and it just looks awful. And Max Brosmer, he could come in. This is a very easy act to follow. The bar is extremely low right now. All he needs to do is basically give them stable quarterback play. He doesn't need to be a superstar. He just needs to come in, and if you're pressured, throw the ball away, right? Just keep the offense moving, keep the chains moving. I don't know that that's what's really going to happen here. I don't think this is a scenario where we can get super excited and think that, we're going to have some amazing fairy tale story where this guy comes in and becomes the quarterback that they've always been looking for, like the Brock Purdy kind of thing. I don't know that that's going to be the case here. I think it's just a lost season for the Vikings, and I think they're going to have to look elsewhere for a quarterback next year. And if they keep McCarthy, it's going to be somebody really, really strong who can come in and compete with him. And I would put my money on that person taking the job, because McCarthy just does not look right now like he is the guy who can be the starting quarterback of this team, or really be a starting quarterback in the NFL at the moment. And maybe we'll get a later career resurgence. We constantly bring up the fact that this guy is so early in his NFL career to write him off. But normally when quarterbacks look this bad early on, it doesn't turn around very quickly. And maybe a few years from now, we'll have that Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith resurgence where he'll end up somewhere else and he'll have a decent little career. But right now, he has to go to the bench, whether it's because of injury or not. And I just don't know that it's going to change much for this offense, because they don't really have that other guy who could step in there, that kind of veteran presence like we've seen from some other teams with like a Jacoby Brissett, for example. Wouldn't it be nice if he was in Minnesota and all of a sudden elevating these pieces. I don't think Max Brosmer's that guy.
Yeah, I want to read off some of the stats for the audio listener that we just showed on the screen here. The stat that we had from Anthony Emeka just puts it into perspective here, just how bad this has been here for JJ McCarthy. He's like 851st out of 852 quarterbacks in EPA per dropback. The only one who's worse than him since 2000, this is the sample here among qualified quarterbacks since 2000, 851 out of 852 quarterbacks. The only one worse than JJ McCarthy is Jamarcus Russell. Like, that's the level of play we're getting here. I also think the stat for Marif Hassan that we showed as well, I think really contextualizes what happened in this past week's game, which watching it, as Reef points out here, when eliminating dropbacks with quick pressures under 2.5 seconds, JJ McCarthy's performance against the Packers this week ranked 344th out of 346 quarterback performances this year in EPA per dropback, 331st in success rate. And like, that's, again, that is eliminating the quick pressures. Because to me, this is the thing with McCarthy that's just felt off all year. He's never in tune with the speed of the game, Boone. And for as much as we could say like Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield, some of these QB resurgences in other spots here, it was never this bad. It was never off rhythm with the speed of the game, because I think at times McCarthy has felt really sped up and he's getting the ball out way too quick. He's putting so much velocity on it. It's not a catchable football. And in this past week's game, it's almost like he really tried to slow it down. You know, he tried to slow down the pace of his game, and then he was just getting obliterated because he's holding on to the ball forever, because he's kind of just 1 to 2, okay. That and it's just, again, a guy like that, I said you need to roll with him the rest of the season and see what he has, but a guy like that is just unplayable. You've got to take him out of there for his own good, because these are no longer valuable reps for him. So you sit him down, you see what Brosmer has this week. And again, he's in the concussion protocol. I think that's real. He's got a concussion. That's probably going to take him out for this week anyways. But I think at this point it's just, hey, we give him a beat. We put him on the bench. And I think, frankly, this is probably what they were trying to do with the Carson Wentz stuff, is they kept saying, he's not ready to play. He might be clear, but he's not ready to play. I think they were kind of telling us, hey, we've seen signs that this might happen here.
I think it's also like more condemning that he has Kevin O'Connell as a coach and it's gone this way, right? Like some of those other players, you can at least say like, wow, the coaching staff wasn't great, and maybe if they had gone to a better team, it could have worked out for them. This was the scenario. Like one of the reasons why I thought he could surprise people before the season was because of the environment around him. And we could talk all day about how the injuries to the offensive line or some of the key pieces haven't been out there. We had Jordan Addison, who was suspended early in the season, all the excuses that you want to make. And yet he's had the opportunities. And now we have a bunch of these guys out there. Everything's there for him. And he just doesn't look even remotely close to being that guy. So then from a fantasy perspective, you have to look at it and you go, okay, Jordan Addison is completely off the radar, right? Like you're just talking about a total boomer bust flex play. He needs to find the end zone for him to have any fantasy value. Not somebody that I'd be carrying on my team. You look at Justin Jefferson, and I last week had him ranked about as low as I probably ever had him ranked, which was like mid to low end wide receiver 2. I think that's the range that he's in now moving forward until we see something change. And they have a couple of easier matchups. I've brought that up before. You look at the fantasy playoffs, they do have some games there where maybe based on the matchup, we could see a little something. Yet still, I think we're going to look at Justin Jefferson as a guy who's not going to get back into the wide receiver 1 ranks the rest of the season. And that is shocking. And that is just so awful and says so much about the quarterback play there. In the backfield, Aaron Jones this week, they were splitting a little more between him and Jordan Mason. So now that kind of bumps. Aaron Jones was kind of moving into the RB2 range. Now he's kind of back down to being that like fringe low end RB2, high end RB3. Jordan Mason, just a touchdown or bust flex option. Like, what do you look to? Like TJ Hawkinson has been terrible all year. He better not be on your bench even in fantasy right now. So there's really not much to do with this Vikings offense. You keep trotting out Justin Jefferson unless you have better receivers, but you don't feel good about it. And if you're relying on the backs of Minnesota, I don't know that you're going to have a very long run in the fantasy playoffs if you have them in your starting lineup.
Yeah, we had a question, about Justin Jefferson, like panic meter submission that was now I can't remember who sent it in. I apologize. I totally forget, but he is in the cope. Like this is in the coping corner. This whole offense is in the coping corner. It's for good reason. with Jefferson, the question was kind of, again, I apologize because I took it off the outline, but the question was basically, do you try to trade him if you have a trade deadline next week? Like, yeah, if you can, sure, but I don't think anybody else is buying what you're selling, buddy. Everybody else has access to an internet connection. Everybody else is aware that JJ McCarthy is playing the way that he is and now is not going to be playing this week. If there's any optimism off that, look, maybe Max Brosmer ends up being a dude, but it's a big risk to assume that. And if you can unload Jefferson, I would. And I think the reality here is just, this is so not gone to plan for the Minnesota Vikings. Kevin O'Connell even said in the offseason, or maybe it was midway through last year, had the quote about organizations fail young quarterbacks before young quarterbacks fail organizations. And now he's finding out like that's a much easier thing to say than it is to do. It's a much easier thing than it is a life to live, right? And I think that's the problem right now, is that it was Anthony, by the way. Anthony sent in the email, so shout out to Anthony. I appreciate you for sending that in. But we don't discuss the Cope and Corner players, even though we're doing it right now thanks to the news. This is just the reality here of where this is right now. And maybe Brosmer runs the offense better, but it's a weird offense, Boone, in that it is quarterback friendly, and yet it's not, because it's a hard offense. It's not like a Mickey Mouse sort of like, I'm not sure. Like Shane Steichen's offense is very quarterback friendly, in that there are these designed throws. The first read's always there. Right. It's a little bit of a quick game. This is a different unit than that, which is why I think it's been partly hard for JJ McCarthy to just drop in here and be like a caretaker. It's not really that type of unit. We don't know if Brosmer is going to be that, but at least it's something different. And again, from McCarthy's standpoint, I think he needs to take a beat. And then, yes, as you said, they'll bring in competition in the offseason. We will see who wins that battle. So get ready to learn, like, I don't know, maybe it will. Jacoby Brissett's on a 2-year deal. Mac Jones is on a 2-year deal. Like, who is it going to be in terms of and also, by the way, last point, and I'll let you have any other last words on this as well. It really sucks that we're having this conversation leading into week 13 when the Vikings will be playing Sam Darnold, who they had last year. That's extra insult to injury there.
Yeah, that's like another part of all of it. And that's something that I said earlier in the season, where I was very hard on Sam Darnold, him going to Seattle thinking that he can't bring Kevin O'Connell with him and that he would probably fail there. And he has played extremely well, and he looks great with the way all of this has gone down. Yeah, Sam Darnold coming out smelling like roses right now. And fantasy wise, I mean, he's still just like a QB2. He's not somebody that's really like winning anybody their fantasy league. But from an actual, play real life standpoint, Sam Darnold's turned into a solid quarterback, and you bet the Vikings wish they still had him under center.
Second piece of quarterback news item that we have here to discuss: Shedeur Sanders officially named the starting quarterback this week for the Cleveland Browns. This made sense, and Kevin Stefanski, and I kind of said, hey, like, Kevin, you're gonna go ahead and play Shedeur Sanders on the recap show yesterday when he didn't come out and immediately say that he was the starting quarterback. We all kind of knew what was happening here. Of course, all the conspiracy theorists are then out in droves, like, oh, see, he hates Shedeur. He was basically just waiting for Dylan Gabriel to clear the concussion protocol, which he did today, and then immediately Sanders is named the starter. So I don't know if you have, I don't know where you come down on the Shedeur Sanders conspiracy or the hot takes or the or the extremist stuff. You're a normal person, so I assume you aren't one of those human beings. But do you have
I would say one thing on it. I thought it was interesting that when we got the locker room speech from Stefanski, how he just kind of threw in the Shedeur thing. Like, did you watch that speech? Like, he goes off about all the different players that made plays in the game and gives everybody their props, and then very quickly mentions Shedeur Sanders and then moves right away to the defense. It was like the fastest mention. Didn't even really let it breathe. Didn't let the team go crazy for him, getting the win. And again, they were playing against the Raiders. I don't think it was because of Shedeur that they won that game. I think the defense probably was the real reason why they won that game. But I think you might want to hype up your rookie quarterback when he comes in there and plays well enough for the team to win. That's about as far as I wade into the conspiracy waters. I do think that coaches
in fairness, Shedeur in his post-game interview was like, oh, imagine what it's going to look like next year with the full offseason. So maybe Stefanski said
that seemed like a shot. That definitely did seem like a shot. Yeah, no doubt.
He's feeling good enough. I don't need to acknowledge it here. Let's talk about the defense that had 10 damn sacks in the game.
Yeah, and that's probably true. But again, like, I try not to get into the conspiracy theory stuff too much unless I actually think it's going to impact anything for fantasy, which this, I mean, even with Shedeur under center, I don't think that much changes fantasy-wise for this offense, right? It's almost like talking about the Vikings where you look at it and you're just like, I kind of hope I don't have to play into these players on the Browns the rest of the way. Quinshon Judkins, somebody that I was pretty excited about, and we saw him end up having a decent fantasy result in this game, but it was because he found the end zone twice, right? It wasn't because he necessarily had a huge yardage total in the game. So he's still that guy that basically ends up being a touchdown or bust RB2. And they were playing the Raiders, which we have to say again, right? Like, how many matchups are they going to have where they're playing teams on the Raiders level where they're going to keep it very close and they're going to be able to stay competitive and even potentially lean on teams? Also, Judkins got a little bit banged up in this game. He left a couple of times to get checked out in the fourth quarter. So that's something we'll have to keep an eye on. I think he's going to be okay, but again, we're going to have to make sure and monitor and make sure he's going to be able to play this week. If not, Dylan Sampson, and I don't want to spoil anything from the waiver wire section, but guys that we might go out and pick up preemptively just in case something happens there. But yeah, otherwise for this offense, I mean, what are we looking at? Jerry Jeudy had like the most Jerry Jeudy play of all time, right? That was incredible. Like to be wide open downfield and catch that bomb and then just do this weird little skip jump move as he's trying to fake out defenders, not realizing there's a defender barreling down behind him who just knocks the ball clean out and it's a fumble. And you just kind of have to laugh at something like that. But you're not playing anybody in this receiving core. Harold Fannin Jr. is a guy that you could look at as a tight end 2 streamer type, but he hasn't really gotten enough volume and moved up into that tight end 1 range, even though I think the talent is there for him. And otherwise, what is there in this offense? You're not playing Shedeur unless you're in a 2 QB or super flex format. So it's not really an exciting one to talk about here, even though I am very happy for Shedeur that he can go out there, get this opportunity. And then, like you said, let him start the rest of the way. He's not competing for the real starting job. He's not going to be the starter in 2026 unless some sort of miracle happens, but he might be competing for the backup job next year. I think that's the decision that's going to have to be made. Is it going to be Gabriel? Is it going to be Shedeur moving forward? And if he plays well enough the rest of the way, I think he could definitely win that job because Gabriel definitely isn't the answer.
Yeah, no, Gabriel's not the answer. Shedeur is probably not the answer, but you might as well find out here over the rest of the season. And if Shedeur Sanders completely flops, then just go back to Dylan Gabriel because really none of this matters. Their quarterback in the future is not on the roster as of now. Yeah, Jerry Jeudy, Shedeur Sanders' EPA per dropback was getting shared around yesterday. Jerry Jeudy owes him back some of the EPA on that like minus 1.8 EPA that he loses on that fumble. So Jeudy, come on, let's be serious here for 2 seconds. But that was class. I also on the play afterwards. I think it was the next play or at some point when they get the ball back, Shedeur misses him and Judy's like shaking his head because he gets missed. I'm like, brother. What just happened in the game a couple of minutes ago? What are we talking about? So classic Jerry Jeudy stuff over there. But yeah, we'll see Shedeur Sanders the rest of the way as long as he can continue to play some competent football. We are going to take a quick break.
Question? I was going to. Did you see the YouTube question there? Sorry to jump. Who would you rather have rest of the season, Shedeur or JJ McCarthy? And I agree. I would rather play Shedeur Sanders. At least it's like maybe he could be something where McCarthy we kind of know right now he's not. Sorry to cut you off there.
No, I mean, that was it was so depressing that I didn't want to even say it, but you're right. 86% of the voters say they would rather have Shedeur Sanders than JJ McCarthy rest of season. Like rest of season for what? For fantasy football, rest of season to play a game to save your life. I mean, just I don't know. This
would have been a good question for the hurry up offense on Thursday, although this week it'll be on Wednesday.
Oh, that would be pretty alarming. Okay, well, maybe we'll do that. Like, I'll pick. That's a good one. I'm gonna write that down. It's quarterbacks to save Boone's life to start a game. I like that. All right, we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, we'll go through the People's Panic Meter submissions for this week. We'll get into that right after this. All right, it is time to fire up the post Week 12 People's Panic Meter.
Would you say it's time for everyone to panic? Yes, I would, Kent.
Oh my God! Okay, it's happening.
No! Wait!
Everybody stay calm. Everybody stay calm.
What's the procedure?
Stay calm.
The Panic Meter is presented by Dentech, protecting your teeth from fantasy stress, one matchup at a time. Reminder, folks, we have 4 tiers in the People's Panic Meter: no panic, some panic, total panic, and the coping corner. Let's check in on the coping corner. We've got a little Thanksgiving table here. We've got a round table. We've got a whole seating chart for our coping corner here. We've got entire offenses, they've got a table to themselves over here. The Falcons offense, the Vikings offense, the Commanders offense. At quarterback, we have Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence, same draft class. That's cute that they're still together. Wide receivers, we've got Xavier Worthy, we've got Matthew Golden, we've got Keon Coleman, we've got Brian Thomas Jr., and we've got Calvin Ridley. Then for running backs, we've got Bucky Irving, Tony Pollard, Isaiah Pacheco, Alvin Kamara, and Kenneth Walker. Boone, I think the only guy we might want to have a conversation about is Kenneth Walker, who had 70% of the team touches this past week's game. That was the most by any Seahawks running back all year by a significant margin. He didn't have like a monster fantasy day, but 100 yards from scrimmage. Is that enough for you to want to make a case to take him out of the coping corner?
I think we should, and I didn't think you would be surprised at me saying that, because on last week's preview show, I talked about him as a player that you might want to go out and buy for the stretch run for a lot of reasons, right? Like there were some signs pointing towards him potentially continuing to get more work, with the coaching staff coming out and saying that he was earning it. And you mentioned it there, right? He's playing more. It's happening here. We've seen him now top 100 scrimmage yards, 2 straight games. It's what we always kind of wanted. And Zach Charbonnet still vultured a touchdown, so that kind of thing's going to happen. George Halani did get hurt in the game, so maybe that'll remove him from the mix because we saw him vulture a touchdown a couple weeks ago. But regardless, Walker's headed in the right direction. We know he has the talent to do this. I had him on a bunch of teams. He was a player that I liked a lot before the season. Last week, I took my own advice. I went out and traded for him on a couple teams, and I'm really happy that I did. I can't wait here to see what he does the rest of the way, because the schedule is not terrible. The Vikings, the Falcons, the Colts, the Rams, and the Panthers. The Rams are the only true bad matchup in that bunch, and he just put up 111 yards on them in a touchdown right back in week 11. So I think we got to take him out of the coping corner. Harmon, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with taking him out of the coping corner because I've bought in all along to this. Hey, we're going to get a December to remember from Kenneth Walker. They were saving him for the late season run. This has been my line on him for about a month and a half now. So I'm comfortable with it, which means, again, remember the rules of the coping corner. It's not like, oh, you can't start these guys. You got to drop them. We're giving up on them forever. Any of that stuff. It's just, hey, the situation is what it is. It's not changing. I kind of think that, hey, things will change for Kenneth Walker here going forward, which means, if we're saying that, it's right in time for him to disappoint you in the biggest games of your fantasy football matchup. So we'll see.
And we're not going to get crazy. It's like we're looking at him as, an RB2, but he has that RB1 upside if he can find the end zone. But seeing him put up consistent good yardage, seeing the usage go up, those are all the things that we wanted for him before. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I think I gave you props last week when we talked about him, but you nailed this one that you said when the games got more important later in the season, they were going to start to unleash him. And that's exactly what's happening here. And that's what they should be doing. It was a very smart play by them, even though fantasy managers, and I certainly didn't like it, but now hopefully he could be a difference maker on our teams the rest of the way.
Yeah, and if not, then again, he's out of the coping corner. He's eligible to be panicked over. That's the whole thing with the coping corner. The coping corner is just, it is what it is. You need to accept the situation because it's not changing. If we're saying we're taking him out of the coping corner, if we're wrong about that and he has a dud in week 13, flood the panic inbox and tell us that we're a couple idiots. That's what's on the table for you all out there. But I'm with Boone. I think we take Kenneth Walker out of the coping corner. Let's get to this week's submission, starting with, I believe, our most popular submission here this week comes in on Lamar Jackson. Doug W. sends this one in. Lamar Jackson, can't sit him, but also can't get 10 points from him. Are they managing him to save him for tougher matchups, or what's going on? He's apparently going to sit out every Wednesday practice. It feels like they're worried about his durability or something. Love the show. Thanks for the insight every week. Again, we had a ton of submissions on Lamar Jackson. Couldn't read them all off here. Boone, I before I throw this to you, I just want to read out a stat that I found today looking this over. Lamar Jackson has averaged 0.17 EPA per dropback from 2023 to 2025 and 22.2 fantasy points per game. Awesome stuff. His worst and 8th worst games from an EPA per dropback perspective, and 2 of his 3 lowest scoring fantasy games have come in the last 2 games. So he's negative 0.4 EPA per dropback in week 11 against the Browns. And then this past week against the Jets, negative 0.18. And then from a fantasy points perspective, it's his worst and second worst here since 2023. So that's where we're at with Lamar Jackson right now. what is your level of panic? Because the streets, the people, they are very freaked out right now.
Yeah, normally when we get this many emails and messages about a player, normally there's at least some panic, and maybe you'll disagree, but for me, I'm still going absolutely no panic when it comes to Lamar. I know the last 2 games have been bad. You know, it certainly isn't what I projected to happen. I thought he would have decent outings in those, but you can't get away from Lamar here because he plays the Bengals this week, and then he gets them again in the first week of the fantasy playoffs. And last year, Harmon, his 2 games versus Cincy put up 638 passing yards, 8 passing touchdowns, and 88 rushing yards, over 30 points in both games. And we know the Bengals defense did not get any better. He definitely can do this again. He also gets the Steelers and the Patriots. Those are both plus matchups for fantasy QBs and passing attacks. Patriots are more like middle of the pack, but they're kind of that pass funnel. They really stop the run well, so you can throw on them, just kind of a volume thing. So Lamar can have some great games coming up here. I don't have any worries. Do you? For me, it's just no panic whatsoever.
It would be really tough to start freaking out right now as he's about to have 2 of his next 3 games against the Cincinnati Bengals. I will say, I do think no panic is the right answer. He's a great player. He's a proven player. There are 2 things that do concern me right now. Well, 3 things. 1, no Rashad Bateman the last 2 games. What did you guys expect? You take Bateman out of the offense, the whole thing crumbles. Duh. Okay, but on a serious note, the one thing that I do think is a little concerning is, as Doug kind of alluded to here, I'm just not sure he's 100% healthy. And I think you see that anytime he's got to break contain, he's got to move, he does not look right. And I know Lamar is kind of insisting, no, I'm fine, whatever, but they're managing him in practice. In games, he just doesn't look as explosive. And I think when Lamar is not at his optimal ability from a rushing perspective, I do think, and I'm joking about, I'm like 80% joking about the Bateman thing. There's 20% of me that's serious, but 20% of me needs to grow up. But nevertheless, when I do think when they take away that mobile element from Lamar Jackson's game, I do think that the Ravens offense kind of struggles to find some counter punches in what I'd call, what people refer to as the pure drop back game. You know, when they're not leading, when they're not able to lean on teams with the run, which we've said at times this year, their run game has been a little hit or miss. Derrick Henry's putting up fantasy points for you, but their run game's not as consistently successful as it was last year in terms of moving the offense. That's been problematic. Then you don't have the advantage of Lamar's legs. And then you kind of look at the cast of characters around him when it's DeAndre Hopkins, Zay Flowers, this version of Mark Andrews. It's not that great of a supporting cast overall because the offensive line's taking a step back. So I'm not like panicked, but I'm at least open to the idea that we get good games from Lamar Jackson the next 3 weeks, but not the fire-breathing dragon that you probably drafted him to be, which, you know, if he ends up becoming that, then I would be 0% shocked as well.
Do you think it's possible too, like the further we get removed from the injury, we might just all of a sudden he starts to play better and starts to feel better and we get the version of Lamar that we know, right? Like I always think that's possible too. Some of these guys, we've talked about it many times, rush to come back. They're not themselves necessarily. And they've been winning games. And if they're winning and they can put it in Derrick Henry's belly and the defense can make some plays and Lamar doesn't have to be Superman, then maybe they're content doing that for the time being, right? But against the Bengals, I have a very hard time believing that this guy is not going to at least contribute a couple touchdowns in that game. And like you said, maybe it won't be 30 points per game like he did against them last year, but I think Lamar is going to be fine. And you hope by the fantasy playoffs that he is closer to full health and that we do see the Lamar of old and maybe some offenses that can push him a little bit more. Maybe we get like a sneaky shootout with him and Drake Maye or something like that in the fantasy playoffs. But yeah, what is really the move here? There's no, a lot of leagues, you're past the trade deadline. You're not trading him. You're just rolling with them the rest of the way. And I think you're going to be fine based on the matchups and based on who it is. I think he's going to be okay. So I get it. I get the some panic aspect there, but I'm still staying strong at no panic on Lamar.
I think that's the right answer. The reality is you're not benching Lamar Jackson for some person off the waiver wire. So what's the point? You're going to play him and just roll the dice and see what happens.
If he busts in this Bengals game, though, we'll put him in the coping corner after that.
And then he'll actually do well against the Bengals.
Exactly.
The 2 games after. That's how it will go. Okay, Adam sends in our next email here. Is it officially time to start talking about CeeDee Lamb being a bust? I drafted him 4th overall, and he has been a huge disappointment. He's dropping touchdowns, and he's puking in casinos. Hey, allegedly, okay? No, he denied that. All right, he said he didn't do that. He said he could hold his liquor. He couldn't hold on to some passes in the end zone, but he can hold his liquor. What am I to do, says Adam. Thanks for the wisdom. Boone, are we panicking about CeeDee Lamb?
I'm not. I'm really not. And, some weeks I come in a little fiery here, and it feels like we're throwing a bunch of guys in the coping corner, and, we're total panic on others. These ones I'm downplaying. Like, these are superstar type players we're talking about. And I get from a fantasy manager's perspective, you're probably counting in terms of being disappointed by him. You're counting the games that he missed, right? It was 3 full games and then the vast majority of a 4th game. And that's very disappointing. I don't hold that against guys. Like, I don't consider players busts if they got hurt. That wasn't their fault. They didn't really have anything to do with that. That's just an injury happens and they're out, and it's an unfortunate part of fantasy and an unfortunate part of real life, right? But if you look at his stats, he's averaging 79 yards per game, which is good. It's not great, but that's also counting that one game where he only played 7 snaps, didn't have any catches. If we remove that from the mix, he's averaging 90 yards per game. Harmon, that's 4th in the league. Like, it's not bad production whatsoever. He's behind JSN, he's behind Puka, and surprisingly, he's behind his teammate, right? And Pickens, because Pickens is just playing out of his mind this season. But still, 90 yards a game in the games where he has played the vast majority of the snaps. Like, that is still great production from him. And, I just think he's going to be fine the rest of the way. Like, I think Pickens is playing out of his mind, and he's giving him more target competition. He's giving him like the best other option that they've had in that offense with CeeDee Lamb. And yet still Lamb has been producing when he's out there. So you watch the games, you see the drops, you're frustrated by the fact that he basically missed a month this season. That probably hurt you. You probably picked up some losses with your fantasy team there. But Harmon, I'm not panicking about CeeDee Lamb. He's still an elite receiver in every way, in my opinion.
It's so perfectly said that it's a cocktail of disappointment for CeeDee Lamb. It's the perfect ingredients for it, where there was an injury, he's being outproduced by his own teammate, and there's the drops, which, as I've said over the years, it always creates more of a negative visceral reaction than anything else. Like, a wide receiver, we're going to actually talk about this later in the show, but a wide receiver can run, 30 routes in a game, and his quarterback throws at him 10 times. And not that this is what's happening with CeeDee Lamb, I'm just saying generally, a wide receiver can draw 10 targets in a game, and 5 of those are complete airmails by the quarterback, but then the receiver drops one. It's like, oh my God, this guy just let his quarterback down. Unbelievable, disgusting, bench and whatever. So, you're having a negative visceral reaction because you saw the missed opportunity there. So it's that those 3 ingredients are making it feel even worse than it has been for CeeDee Lamb. Because if you do remove that Bears game that he got hurt in, he's averaging 13.9 half PPR points per game, which would put him ahead of wide receiver 9 Emeka Egbuka. So I agree with you. I do think it's no panic. Again, I said this on the recap show yesterday with Chris. If CeeDee Lamb comes out against the Chiefs on Thanksgiving and he catches 10 balls, nobody's going to be shocked at all. He does need to clean up the drops.
Exactly.
He's having the worst drop rate season of his career, but drops are very noisy. They come and go, and I would not be surprised if he drops a massive game here in the next few weeks. So no panic. I'm with Boone on CeeDee Lamb. I mentioned Emeka Egbuka. Good transition here to our next email. Comes in from Eric. Since week 6, Emeka Egbuka has only reached double-digit points once against New England in week 10. This is coinciding with a general drop-off from the Bucs as a team. So how do we account for Emeka Egbuka's current standing? Electric to start the year, but now I don't feel like I can trust him to repeat the same performances he had to start the season. On top of that, Tez Johnson seems to have sapped all the touchdown upside. Is Emeka even the first read anymore? Is this performance drop-off from hamstring injury? Why does he have so many targets and so few catches? A lot of questions here. I'm feeling pretty panicked over here, and I can't afford any more mistakes if I'm going to sneak into the playoffs. Thanks, Matt and Boone. Keep up the good work, and happy Thanksgiving. P.S. In the spirit of the holiday, do either of you have a hot take on Thanksgiving food? I do ham over turkey every year. Turkey is overrated. Boone, do we need to put turkey? Do we need to put turkey in the coping corner after this shot from Eric here? What is your stance on turkey before we talk about Emeka Egbuka?
We're not putting turkey in the come on, turkey is like just an absolute staple. Turkey is fantastic. If anything, I think we should be doing big like turkey meals with stuffing and cranberry sauce and everything. We should be doing that more often. Why are we normally limiting that to like special occasions and holidays?
Canadians have their own Thanksgiving,
more
right?
Often. We do. It's a little earlier. Our Thanksgiving's in October. Yeah, it's not nearly as big of a deal. And I feel like I've more celebrated the U.S. Thanksgiving my whole life because there's always football on. So it's been more of the holiday for me than the Canadian Thanksgiving has.
My panic meter on turkey is it depends on who's cooking it. Okay, right? If it's some goofball that's not going to cook, I mean, you're gonna dry that thing out. I'm full total panic, maybe coping corner for your Thanksgiving holiday. Cook your turkey right. Spatchcock it, brine it, season it well. Get a probe thermometer. If you're still doing that pop out thing from the turkey, you're going right to the coping corner. Okay, so give me a break. I handle the turkey every year. My turkey doesn't suck. So Eric, I say your turkey's bad, but I will agree with you on this. Ham greater than turkey. I look forward to ham at holidays way more than the turkey. I love ham. I love making ham. Shout out to Malcolm Reed, the absolute GOAT, for the raspberry chipotle ham recipe that I make every single year. I picked up the ham and the turkey this morning, and I could not be more jacked up for the ham. The turkey, yeah, it's fine. It's there. But make a good.
The other thing
That's
that was
my stance on turkey.
The other thing that was funny for me, growing up for a stretch, my sister was vegetarian and vegan at different points. So we had some Thanksgivings and some holidays where we didn't go with a turkey. We went with some sort of like fake turkey log type deal. And it wasn't bad. But it was not the same. We definitely had a few where I left hungry. I might have stopped for food on the way home.
Fake turkey log. Yum, yum, yum. Sounds so enticing. Can't wait to head over to the Boons to get my fake turkey log for Thanksgiving.
Well, she's not a vegetarian anymore. Maybe that's why. Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. A few Thanksgivings with the log, I would definitely. I mean, there's a lot. Let's move on. Okay, Emeka Egbuka. What's our panic level on Emeka Egbuka? By the way, lots of reports on this, but we are getting some information now. Tom Pelissero reports an AC joint sprain for Baker Mayfield, non-throwing shoulder. That is encouraging news for a speedy recovery. So that is at least some positivity here. But what's our level of panic on Emeka Egbuka?
I think it's total panic, and it's whether Baker's healthy or not, because Baker healthy the last few weeks, it still hasn't been great. And this was something that I brought up last week, right? That he had a bunch of down weeks, that he wasn't really performing. He only had one good game in his last 5. Now it's only one good game in his last 6. As the person writes in here, I'm looking at him more now as a wide receiver 2 for fantasy the rest of the season. I think he's much more volatile than we thought he was going to be. The injury is kind of when it changed, so I do wonder how much that's lingering for him and kind of holding him back maybe a little bit. But it also coincides with the fact that early in the season, he had Mike Evans out there. They had other weapons in the offense, and there's been some injuries also to the offensive line. The situation, we talk about this all the time, the situation has kind of changed for him, where now defenses are completely keying in on him. I know Chris Godwin came back. This is not the Chris Godwin of old. This is like some fake version of Chris Godwin. He's not the same player with coming off the serious injury. It's kind of a lost season for him. We don't know when Mike Evans is going to be back. So, yeah, I'm very worried about Egbuka and this passing attack as a whole, because now if we're going to add in Baker Mayfield's great news, it sounds like, but if we're going to add in Baker potentially not being 100%, that's even another reason to be worried about this. So, yeah, I think this is super concerning on Egbuka, who, man, all summer was our guy. And boy, did we feel like we were right about that early in the season. And now he's really dragging down people's fantasy teams, including some of my own, Harmon.
Same. It's not been as fun to have Emeka Egbuka lately. Lot to discuss here. Number one, you mentioned Baker Mayfield just hasn't played that well. The Bucs' passing offense as a whole, it hasn't been right. Baker Mayfield, he from weeks 7 to 12, 31st out of 33 quarterbacks with 100+ dropbacks and EPA per dropback. And obviously, EPA is not a quarterback isolating stat. It just shows the health of the passing game has not been good for the Bucs, and that's for a variety of reasons. With Chris Godwin back this week, Emeka Egbuka played a season low 18.3% snaps in the slot. And that's problematic because it forces him back out to that perimeter, back out to the X receiver spot where he can win, he can play, but it's easier for defenses to take him away over there. That has been a big part of the story. the downfield pass. And I think Baker just has been streaky to put some of this on him. And that's Baker Mayfield. He's hot when he's hot. He's cold when he's cold. He's one of those type of quarterbacks. But I also think, Boone, I'm with you on total panic overall. And this is just kind of how it goes with wide receiver. We're going to look back at the end of the season, and Emeka Egbuka probably will be like wide receiver. I don't think he's going to fall too far here. He'll probably finish the season as a top 15 guy, and he could still have some big weeks the rest of the way. Like, he's not somebody I'm looking to bench necessarily, but it could be one of those things where it's, at the beginning of the year is a top 5. He finishes the year top 15. And the truth is kind of, it was much more volatile than it felt, looking at the end of season results. That's probably how it's going to go with Emeka Egbuka here.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. You're kind of touching on it there. Like, sometimes in fantasy, you end up sort of handcuffed down the stretch where once the trade deadline passes, you have what you have, or you can look to the waiver wire. And I don't think you're going to find anybody on the waiver wire who's better than Emeka Egbuka. So he's probably going to stay in your lineup, right? You're going to look at him as a top 20 fantasy option at his position. And yet you might just kind of feel like, I don't think this is going to be one of the guys that's going to get me to a fantasy title this season. So it's unfortunate because of how strong he started, because of how great he looks. And I think he's going to go on to have an awesome career, but we might just need a reset next year with some healthier options in this offense, and potentially with him just being healthier. I do think that does factor in. The defenses are keying in on him more, but it just seems to coincide with him picking up that hamstring injury. And since then, the production has been nowhere near the same, right? So I kind of scoffed there. I got worried when you just made that comment about, him playing a season low and snaps out of the slot. Like, man, that is even more concerning now. Like, that makes me even start to think about Coping Corner. If that's going to be the case, if they're going to start playing Godwin in there and moving him outside more, now I'm even more worried about him, to be honest.
Let's see if having a credible run game with Bucky Irving back maybe helps. I think that, again, this team has just been so banged up. At some point, the chickens come home to roost. The Niners are one of these other teams that have been banged up, but they're starting to get guys back. The Bucs are like, they got Chris Godwin back, but we know that Chris Godwin's not going to be Chris Godwin this year. That just is what it is. Next two matchups, though, Cardinals Saints. I mean, would you be surprised if he had a big game in any of those two? I mean, probably not. Like, those are good wide receiver matchups. All he has to do is score a touchdown, and nobody's talking about it. The last point I would say is, I do think, and producer Colin pointed this out, safe to say that after two great hits with Dave Canales and Liam Cohen, I think Josh Grizzard, it's not like he's doing anything on a weekly basis from, oh my God, this is offensive, get this off my screen. But I don't know that he's like added anything to the offense here. So I think that's probably part of this as well. I'm going to make a change in the outline here. Producers, please don't kill me, only because I think these two guys make a lot of sense back to back here. Dominic sent this in on Rome Odunze. Weekly submission for Rome Odunze. I'm not concerned with his role per se, but it's very clear that he gets more work versus man coverage and zone coverage. Just not quite sure how many more matchups are going to be clear goes for him. And I wanted to throw these two guys together because, one, they were both these guys that just were rock stars to start the season. They were great. They were great picks. They were both guys that we really liked, Boone. And it was like, oh man, I felt real smart for being an Odunze, bro. I felt real smart for being an Emeka backer at the beginning of the year. Lately, they are like having the exact same season, which is so funny because Ray Garvin and I did a segment that obviously stirred things up on social media. Who would you rather have in Dynasty, Rome Odunze or Emeka Egbuka? And of course, half the comments are like, it's Emeka, it's so obvious, you moron. Oh, it's Rome Odunze, it's so obvious, you moron. And the answer really has been, well, I don't know, neither one of them's helping you win a Dynasty title right now, I'll tell you that. So any comment on that is fine, but what's your level of panic on Rome Odunze, who, like I said, is having a very similar this half, this is great, this half is not season so far?
And my level of panic is very similar. It's total panic here for him as well, right? And yeah, you nailed it. That early in the season, you feel like you got it right. We got him, right? He's going to potentially be a wide receiver 1 this year. And now you look at it and you're like, man, he's kind of like a low-end wide receiver 2. It's a lot more boom or bust than I expected. And my big reason for like having a ton of panic, because I think like talent-wise, his role in the offense, I'd be willing to overlook some stuff, but the schedule, man, coming up for him is brutal. The Eagles next, so I feel like it's going to get worse before it gets better here in that matchup. Then the Packers, the Browns, and the Packers again. That's not the easiest month for him there in my mind. So I'm really worried about him as well, and kind of a similar outlook where you're probably going to have to play him. The odds of you having a couple receivers, 2 or 3 receivers that are better than him, pretty unlikely. So he's going to be in your lineup, and yet I can't say with any level of confidence that I think he's going to be one of those players that leads you to a fantasy title this year based on what we've seen lately from him.
Yeah, I agree with you about that. I mean, the schedule's not ideal. That is for sure. I think a couple other things are important to discuss here for Rome Odunze, which, by the way, like the first 4 weeks still happened. Okay, like and same with Emeka Egbuka. The first couple weeks, the first couple months of the season still happened. You know, we can't do since week 6 he's been terrible. Well, weeks 1 to 4, that's when he scored all his touchdowns. He scored 4 of his 6 touchdowns in the first 4 weeks of the season. If you take away the games where he scored all of his touchdowns, this player has actually been terrible this season. So those games still happen. They still count towards his season, even if they haven't counted for our fantasy teams lately. And trust me, I've got Odunze teams, and it has been very, very, very frustrating. And I think the frustrating part of it is that this is yet another one where there's multiple factors at play here. As I've said every single week, and I'll call out this stat from Scott Barrett, who just put this perfectly. I'm the biggest Odunze guy out there, but if we're calling balls and strikes here, we have to point out that he has left too many plays on the field due to drops. And as Scott points out, he actually leads all receivers in, the approximate fantasy points he's lost due to drops. 33 points due to drops this year. Second is Chris Olave. Third is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Fourth is Devontae Adams. That's the other thing about this is there are a lot of good players on this list. And at some point, he can just correct the drop problem. I'm not worried about that long term. I'm really not. It's not something that I'm freaking out about because, like I said, Amon-Ra St. Brown's losing points to drops. He doesn't have a drops problem. He's in a bit of a spell right now, but that stuff can get corrected. I think it can get corrected with Rome Odunze. It just has to get corrected at some point. Also, though, it is a passing game that is crowded. And, guys like DJ Moore had a good game last week. Luther Burden is playing more. Colson Loveland is a rock star. So you can't really afford the margin for error, especially when, again, I can go back and point out to the plays this past week's game where Rome is open and Caleb misses him. And that's happening every single week. But this is part of the deal with Odunze this year, which is why I think him and Emeka go down as very similar players, Boone, where they're ADP beaters, but they didn't end up being wide receiver ones, which is what they looked like at the beginning of the season. And now we're sort of correcting to, okay, they're not that, but they are probably still good picks where they finish relative to ADP, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you talked about Caleb there. I think that is a huge part of it. When I'm mentioning the schedule, it's not just so much that I'm worried about Rome going against that schedule. It's also that I'm worried about Caleb going against that schedule, right? Because some of his better games have come in easier matchups, and now when he's facing some tougher defenses, I do worry that is he going to be able to get the ball to Odunze? Is the passing attack going to have as much success overall, which indirectly is going to affect Odunze as well? There's going to be less scoring opportunities, all that sort of stuff. So I think that schedule is a huge reason for me why I was willing to go total panic and really kind of starting to push towards coping corner, because I don't know that it's going to turn around consistently enough where we're going to be that happy having Odunze in our lineups. And it's like you said, when all's said and done on this fantasy season, I just don't know that we're going to look back and think of Egbuka and Odunze as guys that got you to a fantasy championship, even though they had incredible starts. And I always bring up, you asked me which league I'm most frustrated in a couple weeks ago, and I mentioned that one charity league that I'm in. Guess who I have on that team? Not just Emeka Egbuka. I also have Rome Odunze as well. And early in the season was feeling great at the time about it, and not so much anymore.
The good thing is that these guys are still talented players that I think in isolation are playing well, even if there are drop issues with both of them to correct. And at any point, even in tough matchups, I just trust good young receivers to come through. So like if Rome has a really good game on Friday against the Eagles, Black Friday, I wouldn't be surprised. And, it just is one of those things where that's fantasy sometimes. Just where you think it's trending this direction, it turns around. And I think that it can do that. I think Caleb is playing well overall, but he's just going to have these up and down moments. And the stat sheet was great this past week, but I think the first half was really, really rough for him. So we'll continue to sort of track that play from Caleb Williams going forward, even though overall the season is a success for the Bears. And I'm excited about what this offense looks like in 2026. That is for sure. Ben Johnson looks good. These young supporting players are good as well. Let's get to another receiver question here before we go to break. This one comes in from Eric. Probably not too many sickos out there trying to throw Alec Pierce in their lineup week to week, but What's the concern level with him and his schedule going forward? We know he eats versus single high, but it seems like a lot of cover 2 coming. Will we see him bounce back, or is he a waiver wire landmine to gift someone else in my league? Great call here from Eric. I wanted to highlight this before I throw it to you, Boone. I put the stats together before we came on the air. The Colts pass catchers are crowded, and that can be frustrating when you're looking at that on the surface. However, the matchup wise, there is actually a pretty clear spread here. So against 2 high safeties, according to Fantasy Points data, Alec Pierce averages the lowest targets per route run and yards per route run on the team. 12.5% targets per route, 1.4 yards per route. Michael Pittman leads the team in percentage of team yards and yards per route run at 2.22. Josh Downs also is highly targeted against two high safeties. When it's a single high team, then it's Alec Pierce that runs away with all 3 of targets per route run, 27%. Team percentage of team yards, 35%. Yards per route run, 3.12. Like I pointed this out before that Falcons matchup, it was a really good spot for Alec Pierce because they play more single high coverage than the entire NFL. So and Tyler Warren is pretty similar regardless of matchup there. So I think that's something that we just kind of have to talk about on a week-to-week basis with these Colts pass catchers. But just wanted to note that since Eric put it in the email. What is your level of panic on Alec Pierce?
Only some panic for me. And yeah, the schedule does get tougher coming up, at least what they've had so far. And the Texans matchup is certainly scary. I can tell you that as, a Bills fan, but also the Colts probably have 3 receivers that are better than any receivers on the Bills, I would say. So maybe they'll have a little more success against the Texans than the Bills did. Come on, we're not going that far with it. Regardless, I'm not giving up on Pierce after one down game, right? Like you think about what he did before that, he was playing very well. Before the bye, he was the wide receiver 33 in fantasy points per game. That's probably where he belongs. I might have gotten a little high on him in my rest of season rankings. I think I had bumped him up inside the top 25 because he was producing, right? He had 3 really strong games there. I thought that maybe he was going to make a move and push to kind of maybe even be the more valuable fantasy asset in that receiving core, but he probably does belong more in that wide receiver 3 range, even though he has the wide receiver 2 upside. He has the potential for big games, but yes, this isn't a guy that I'm that worried about. I think he is still going to continue to have big contests, but he is a volatile player. He's not a number 1 receiver who's going to command 10 targets a week or something like that. That's not the kind of player he is. But can he flirt with top 30 numbers the rest of the way? I absolutely think he still can. So just some panic for me.
Yep, I pretty much agree with everything you just said there. That we'll talk about those single high versus 2 high matchups as they come for Alec Pierce when we're talking about the Colts. But yeah, I think people maybe just overcorrected on Pierce. Again, I referenced this with Chris yesterday where is there a new wide receiver 1 in town for the Indianapolis Colts? No, Alec Pierce he's an improved player. He's gotten much better on his own this year, but he still has his applications in the offense. And just because a guy we do this all the time. It's this guy's getting more targets lately. Is he the new number 1? Well, sometimes there's a reason the targets are going that way. And again, from a matchup perspective, there was a reason they were going towards Pierce, and he is better. He's much better this year. So that is good for him. But I do think he's probably more of a matchup dependent, volatile player. So we'll continue to track those single high versus 2 high splits for Alec Pierce and the rest of these pass catchers. We are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got some social media submissions. We'll get into those right after this. All right, we're back. I lied, okay? I'm a liar. I said we were going to get to our social media submissions. We're not. We're actually going to hit one more email panic meter submission. This one comes in from Harry. It was so interesting that we decided we needed to squeeze it in here. The Rams are now the favorites to win the Super Bowl. If they do, what are the chances that Stafford retires on top? If so, could it start a chain reaction with Adams and even Sean McVay? And if Stafford leaves, what does that mean for Puka's production in fantasy / dynasty? Thanks. You guys are killing it with the show. I love that Harry sends this in. The Rams are the best team in football. Matthew Stafford, favorite to win MVP. Is it time to panic about the Rams? That is only a dynasty manager. And I say that lovingly. That is only a dynasty fantasy player's mindset. So, Boone, what do you think of this chain reaction? I love that. The chain reaction of retirements here if the Rams win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I want to caution people against like being too cute with this stuff sometimes. And it's not that that's not plausible. That could certainly happen, right? But I think when you start to project like one thing and then another, you can really take yourself down a path where you make a bad fantasy decision and you decide to get rid of a guy like Puka Nacua, which I think would be a terrible move. So for me, I wanted to say no panic. I said some panic just because there is a level of uncertainty, right? That Stafford is older and there's paths to them potentially getting somebody else in there. I think it's a very attractive destination if Sean McVay sticks around. And it seems like he's kind of more reinvigorated the last, couple of years, the last year or so. There was a time there when it was like, is he going to retire or not? But I think he's in it. I think they have the ability to attract a very enticing, veteran free agent. Or we know they have the Falcons pick, which you mentioned, right? They could stick with that pick. It's potentially flirting around the top 10. They could stick with that pick. Or like you said, could they potentially trade up and get a quarterback? I think that's probably what they had in mind when they went out and got that pick, right? Trying to find a successor for Stafford. The reason that I want to caution people against being too cute, though, I'm in an analyst league where someone traded me, Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski, in their last year with the Patriots. And I got them for a song. It was like they traded me a late second and I gave them a late second and they gave me an early third and those guys. Like it was like I barely gave up anything because the person in their head figured Brady and Gronk are retiring at the end of the season. They're not going to go play for another team. Well, guess what? I not only got those guys cheap, they stayed on my team. They were starters on my team for multiple seasons after that and allowed me to just dominate the league because I got 2 starters for essentially nothing. So I say that as that cautionary tale for people. Don't go down that road. Don't talk yourself into these scenarios that could happen. Just be smart about it. Consider it. That's the right thing to do. But I think this team could get another quarterback in there. I think Puka Nacua is definitely a good enough player that he could produce with another quarterback. So it's not like his value is solely attached to Stafford the way some other less talented players might be. I think this is a guy that's going to have a fantastic career. So I'm not that worried about this offense. If we find out that McVay was out of there, then we'd start to maybe think about it a little bit more, but I don't think he's going anywhere right now.
Oh yeah. Look, maybe I'll look like a complete idiot by saying this. I think there is a 0% chance that McVay would retire if they won the Super Bowl. Like, I do think that there was. Go and read some of Jordan Rodriguez's reporting on this. She does a great job. She covers the entire NFL now for The Athletic, but she used to be the beat writer specifically for the Rams. Like, go read some of her reporting on how McVay fell in love with coaching that first year after kind of being in the darkness in 2022, that 2023 season. All those young guys really made him fall in love with coaching. And you could feel that. I mean, Look at how the Rams in this season have gone from being, we're an 11 personnel team. We're 13 personnel. Now we're back to 12. Now we're back to he loves that art of coaching and finding those advantages. I'd be stunned if he retired after Super Bowl. You don't have to worry about that. The Stafford thing, I think that's within reason, but I love your analysis about the fact that, hey, Puka Nacua is a very quarterback-friendly receiver. As we're seeing with Justin Jefferson, nobody is truly quarterback-proof, and obviously a downgrade on Matthew Stafford is almost certainly coming. Especially this version of Matthew Stafford, where he's got 30 touchdowns and 2 freaking picks. Like they're gonna downgrade on that if he retired this offseason. But still, I think Puka Nacua in his insular role would still be very fantasy viable and be very fantasy friendly with almost anybody at quarterback back there. And to your point, I'm going to say this. I've already seen the future on this one, Boone. I tweeted this at Ted Wynn from The Athletic. Here's my prediction, because Ted was quote tweeting an interview with Fernando Mendoza, Nate's guy in the draft, and saying like he's Sean McVay's spirit animal. The universe needs to find a way for them to get together. I was like, oh, this is easy. Titans get the first pick, which right now, if the season ended today, they'd have the first pick. They stick with Cam Ward. The Rams trade up with their pick and the Falcons pick, plus a little more, whatever. Who cares? Doesn't matter. Right now, the Falcons pick is at 11th. We'll see how that ends. I think it probably goes more up than down. And that's how they get up to number 1 to get him. It's been foretold. I've already seen this. So if this happens, remember where you heard it first.
It definitely seems possible. I think this is a great call by you. And the Rams are a smart organization, man. They're going to know that this is their shot to get that next quarterback, to pull off like a Green Bay Packers type move where they could potentially go from Stafford to a young, talented QB that could take over and be the guy there for the next 10 plus years. I definitely think this is possible, man.
I think it's even possible if Stafford doesn't retire because,
Yeah.
Nate and I bagged on the Falcons on 301 last week for how they kept saying, well, we can trade this first pick because we're never going to be picking this high again. Okay, well, you're the Atlanta Falcons. These are the LA Rams. They actually will not be picking this high again. So I think there's a chance that even if Stafford's like, I'm not riding off into the sunset, I'm going to do it one more year, which, by the way, almost nobody retires on top. These players think they can do it one more. You think Devontae Adams, after scoring all the touchdowns in the world, is going to be like, you know what, I'm washed. I should probably just retire on top. I bet he'd come back for another year, even if it's his buddy Jimmy G at quarterback next year. Why not? So I do think there's a chance that Stafford, all these guys are back next year, so I wouldn't be panicking about this. But yeah, potentially quarterback of the future coming for the drafts, coming for the Rams in the draft year. All right, let's rip through some social media submissions here, rapid fire style. Let's get this first one in. At Best Ball Saul sends in Drake Maye is down the whole left side of his line. 2 of his 3 best run stoppers on defense also down. What's our level of panic on Drake Maye? We do expect, I haven't seen an update on rookie left guard Jared Wilson, but rookie left tackle Will Campbell, who's been really good this year, he's going to miss at least 1 to 2 weeks, it sounds like. So that is definitely a loss there.
I'm open to hearing an argument for some panic, but it's still no panic for me. Like, I think the schedule's fine. I think he's looked great this year. Obviously, the matchup with the Bills in week 15, maybe not ideal. That would be like the only sticky spot, I think, there, but he could deliver in that game. So I think with him, it's just variance in my mind, especially with the touchdowns, right? Like Henderson scoring all these touchdowns recently. If you throw 1 or 2 of those over to Maye, I don't even think this question's being submitted, right? Like, so I'm at no panic for him.
Yeah, Giants and then the bye. I think there's a chance maybe Will Campbell comes back after the bye. I think there's at least a chance here, and we're not really having this conversation. I agree with you. No panic on Drake Maye. Next one comes in from at the Sports Dude 19. Jameson Williams. We saw him have 2 good games with Dan Campbell taking over his play call. Then he puts up a 0 this week. Is he just someone we need to put in as our wide receiver 3/flex and just say a prayer? He's the biggest boom bust player in the league right now. What is the deal with Jameson Williams? Are you panicked at all after he put up his second 0 of the season, I might add?
Yeah, I mean, he is a bit of a boomer bust player, but it's just funny to me how like quick people can turn on a guy, right? I know. We expected a big game. I projected a big game. I had a bold prediction that I thought he was going to have a wide receiver 1 finish last week, and he comes out and has 0 catches on 3 targets. Totally disappointing. I get it. But before that, 66 at a TD, 119 at a TD, 88 at a TD. Those were his 3 games before that. Like, we're just erasing that from our minds because he had 1 bad week. Like, I don't think that's the way to approach this at all. The Packers are a bit of a tougher test in week 13, but there's lots of easier matchups coming up here down the stretch for him. He's got the Cowboys in week 14. They're giving up the most fantasy points to receivers. The Steelers in week 16, they're top 5 in that category. So he's going to be boomer bust. Yes. I don't think he's quite like you have to say a prayer about him in your lineup. I think he has some great games. I think he's going to be fine. I am not panicked about him whatsoever.
Okay, I will just say if you take Jameson Williams out of your fantasy lineup because he got you a 0 last week, he's 100% scoring a touchdown in week 13 on Thanksgiving in front of your face early in the morning on Thanksgiving. You're going to be 1, maybe 2. I don't know how you party. 1 to 2 mimosas deep at that point at your Thanksgiving brunch. You're readying that turkey, and he is 100% putting a touchdown in your face. So just get ready for that. Okay, next one comes in from at Goons of Pitt. I don't know about, quote, panic, but Jaylen Warren is concerning and is getting Arthur Smith. I thought he was pretty good. I thought he was a pretty good pass catcher, but he no longer gets it. It's all Gainwell. He also split red zone work and gives it plenty of rushing attempts. It seems at this point that Gainwell is the more valuable player to start moving forward.
You just putting that out there? You're just throwing it out there? Yeah, I think for
it was
me,
it was a question. It was a no. It was a question.
Okay.
It's not on the screen here. That's how the tweet finishes. I didn't say that. No. I didn't say that. It was how the tweet finished. I guess I could have asked you, what's your level of panic? Do you agree with that statement from Goons of Pitt, not Matt Harmon?
I think it's some panic here. I think it's all about expectations. And we talk about this on this episode all the time, right? Like, it comes down to expectations. And I did a couple weeks ago encourage people to go out and get Warren. He had a great schedule coming up. I thought he was a player that you'd want to buy for the stretch run. And then things changed because he got hurt in that game. And since then, that's where Kenny Gainwell has stepped in and gotten a bigger role in the offense. And now they're playing kind of a hot hand because I don't think Warren's 100%. And you saw it in his efficiency just dropped way, way off, where Gainwell still producing, still putting up decent stats. And yeah, it's disappointing that we're not seeing Warren as involved in the passing game. I wonder if that's something to do with the injury as well. But either way, this is more of a committee. You look at Warren now, not as a guy I think that has a chance to be a top 12 running back. I think you look at him more as a guy who's an RB2, potentially even a low end RB2 if he can't get healthy. My phone going off here.
Is that Arthur
My
Smith
phone,
calling
my
you
laptop,
to let
actually.
you
It wasn't
know,
even my
like-
phone. My phone was off. The sound was on my laptop, but it was coming through there. Regardless, I think we're looking at Warren as a guy that I have some panic about, not totally freaking out. But yeah, I think it's the expectations, because the way we were looking at him a couple weeks ago before this injury, I was potentially seeing a guy that I thought could really increase his value. And instead, because of the injury, it's kind of gone the other way.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And look, Kenny Gainwell, I said this after week 1, he was born to play the bigger role than you expected role in Arthur Smith's offense. And there's always one guy getting that, and he is definitely going to be out there a little bit. I started Kenny Gainwell in a league, and it's that same league that I talked about yesterday with freaking Cam Ward, that I benched him and I put Geno Smith in Superflex like a moron. And if Kenny Gainwell they'd given him that touchdown and I had started Cam Ward, I might have pulled off the upset of all time in a disaster class episode for that team there. What can you do except hate yourself? Last question we're going to get here at SYC22. Coping hard with Saquon Barkley. Is it coping corner time for Saquon Barkley? Boone, the run game in Philadelphia is just not getting fixed. What is our level of panic for the Philadelphia Eagles star running back?
Are you going to make an argument for coping corner? I was going to go total panic on this one because I get it. It's been bad. They lose Lane Johnson to injury. We talked about the splits last week of what this offense looks like with or without him. The rushing efficiency, even worse somehow with him out of the lineup, right? So it's not looking great. Barkley only finding the end zone once in his last 4 outings, right? 1 game. Just so many frustrating things about this offense. But the only thing keeping me away from the coping corner is the schedule, right? It's the Bears this week, and then in the fantasy playoffs, the Raiders, the Commanders, and the Bills. And it also seems like for the time being that Johnson's going to avoid IR, so he could potentially be back for the fantasy playoffs. Maybe they get a little boost there. Yeah. I don't know. That's the only thing right now I think that can hold you away from coping corner with Saquon.
Yeah, I mean, the run game wasn't even good with Lane Johnson, but obviously yesterday it looked even worse. He's running back 17 in points per game. He's just drafted to be so much better. I think it's time to put him in the coping corner. Like, what's going to change?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, and I made the mistake when we talked about Justin Jefferson, a few weeks back or a month ago, where I kind of held strong saying, well, the schedule is going to get easier and he's going to come through in those games, and he hasn't, right? So might be a similar situation here with Barkley. I'm willing to go coping corner here with him. I figured you were going to make the case, and I was kind of up near there. I'll go coping corner with Barkley with you.
Yeah, I think we go coping corner with Saquon Barkley, which means Black Friday, he's definitely dropping 100+ yards and a touchdown on the Chicago Bears.
No doubt.
No doubt in my mind.
Yeah,
Start
lock
Saquon
it in.
Barkley in your fantasy leagues. Lock it in, baby. All right. Quick update on the coping corner. We won't go through the whole list here because we got to get to break. But Saquon Barkley's in. Kenneth Walker's out. What could possibly go wrong with putting Saquon Barkley in the coping corner and removing Kenneth freaking Walker? What could possibly go wrong, Boone? I mean, nothing, right?
It's our frustrations from a whole season with this Eagles offense, and it's leading us to now put Barkley in, and I worry it's going to come back to bite us. But yeah, we'll do it for the time being.
Alas, what can you do? I mean, this segment makes no sense anyway, so who really cares? All right, we are going to take our last break. When we come back, it's time for Boone's waiver wire selections of the week. We'll get into that right after this. All right, we're back. Let's get into the waiver wire this week. We go position by position to to talk through the players that you need to add. Boone, let's start with the quarterbacks.
Yikes. I don't know that we want to even talk about quarterbacks this week, Harmon. It is so bad. And I'm always honest with everyone, right? I'm not going to sit here and try to gussy it up and tell you, oh, this is a fantastic quarterback week. These guys are going to help you win your league. They are not. Let's hope that because there's no buys this week, you don't need help at quarterback, because you look at these options and it is brutal. CJ Stroud has not cleared concussion protocol. The reports out there are that he's going to clear this week and he's going to play. So you could look at him going against the Colts, right? I think that's an option, especially with some guys on that offense starting to emerge. Jaden Higgins, who we're going to talk about in a second. Maybe he could come back and have some success. We saw Davis Mills have some success, get under center there. So CJ Stroud, I think, is the one that you'd go out and try to pick up. Trevor Lawrence at the Titans, maybe. Like Trevor Lawrence, even this week, it was 3 touchdown passes. So you'd think, okay, he had a phenomenal fantasy game, but no, he turned the ball over like 4 times. Like just brutal there. Tua Tagovailoa against the Saints. You know, like at award shows when there's like seat fillers, I feel like Aaron Rodgers was just a seat filler here. It was like, we have a graphic where we like to show 4 guys. Aaron Rodgers, sure, we'll throw him out there because like if you look at some of the options from my column here, Bryce Young at the Rams. Nope. Tyrod Taylor at the Falcons. Oh, like Cam Ward at the Jags. Tyler Shuck at Miami. Like it is bad, man. Like it is bad at quarterback this week. So I say we don't even need to talk about this. Let's just move on to the other positions. I'm telling you, Harmon, we don't need to waste our time.
You could have at least put Shedeur in the 4th spot so that the social media team would share the segment. I mean, you could have at least done that for us, but I guess you're right. That's the seat filler is Aaron Rodgers. All right, let's go to running backs because I agree with you. My God, what a cast.
Thankfully.
All right, we got 4 players. Yeah, we've got 4 players to talk through that are a little bit more interesting at the running back position.
Absolutely. So Devin Neal going up against the Dolphins. This is all based around Alvin Kamara being banged up and potentially not playing this week and maybe not playing for a few weeks, potentially, maybe not playing for the rest of the fantasy season. We really don't know at the moment, but Devin Neal would be the next man up. Chris Rodriguez Jr., who I talked about last week before the Commanders went on bye. Going into the bye, he was emerging as the number 1 running back in that backfield, even though it is a committee. And even though coming off the bye, do we see that post-bye rookie bump for JCM? Could Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt get going down the stretch? Schedule's kind of easy, especially in the fantasy playoffs. So I think you're going to want to have the Commanders lead back. Right now, it is Chris Rodriguez. So you could go out and get him. He's only 16% rostered. Raheem Mostert versus the Chargers, just 1% rostered. And this is based on the fact that Ashton Genty got dinged up last week. So if Genty misses time, you probably don't want to have to start a Raiders running back based on the fact that they haven't been great, even with Genty out there most weeks. And yet Raheem Mostert would be the guy who would probably see the most work in that backfield with Zamir White, who would probably be active, and Dylan Lobby. And man, it's getting ugly pretty quick here too. And then Dylan Sampson, who I referenced earlier, Quinshon Judkins left a few times to get checked out by the medical staff at the end of that game. He did come back, so I think he's going to be able to play. But regardless, this is just another one of those reasons why this time of year, we've talked about it in past weeks, you want to go out and get these backups, because if Quinshon Judkins doesn't play next week, if Ashton Genty's not playing next week, if Alvin Kamara is not playing next week, you have these options. You don't have to go to the waiver wire and fight for them, even though these aren't the sexiest names, right? Like Devin Neal's somebody that you would potentially put a little bit of a bid on to go get, because I think he could have some run here for a few weeks in that backfield. I think he's a guy that you could potentially look at. Most of his production this week came through the air. He had 5 catches for 43 yards. But the Saints do have one of the easiest running back schedules remaining here. The Dolphins, the Buccaneers, the Panthers, the Jets, the Titans. Taysom Hill, the versatile tight end, is probably going to be involved. He started to get some more carries this week. They have Audric Estime, who would probably be active if Kamara's not out there. Like, this is where we're going. We're looking at Neal not as somebody that has a ton of talent, is going to blow you away that way, just as a volume-based guy who could come through for fantasy as like a low-end RB2. So you go out, you pick him up, and maybe you get a starter here down the stretch. Rodriguez is the one I mentioned, the schedule, right? If he can maintain his role, Washington gets the Giants, the Eagles, and the Cowboys in the fantasy playoffs. So whoever's leading the way for the Commanders could have some fantasy value there. But having these backups is so important, Harmon. People should be stashing as many as they can, not just some of the guys that I mentioned there, but you look at Bashal Tutin and Blake Corum, Tyler Algier, Tank Bigsby, Devin Singletary, if you go deeper like Ray Davis, Keaton Mitchell, get these guys on your bench so that you don't have to fight for them on the waiver wire. But if you're looking for starters this week, Devin Neal, Chris Rodriguez, those would be the two to try to go after.
Yeah, this is pretty ghastly list when you look at just the teams. I mean, these are the 4 of the worst teams in the NFL. Saints, Commanders, Raiders, Browns. But that leads to the point of what you said, that these stash the actual good backup running backs. And Boone keeps a whole list of this on the site. We're going to do a show on it here in the next few weeks once we're done with some of our panic meter. When we get past that point of the show, we'll get that on the books. We'll do the backup running back stash candidates. But Boone keeps a running list on the website, and we're reading again in 2025. So make sure you check that out, because sooner or later, somebody who doesn't play for one of the 4 worst teams in the NFL is going to be on this graphic, and you want to be among the group that is already rostering them, not fighting over, I'd say Tyler Algier is on there for, knock on wood, Bijan Robinson's hurt. You don't want to be like, well, I guess consolation prize, I'll get Raheem Mostert in case Ashton Genty doesn't play. No, you want to have Tyler Algier on your bench. God, how depressing is that? Like, I don't even want to play the starting running back in fantasy on the Raiders. Let me play the backup running back on the Chip Kelly Las Vegas Raiders. I will say Devin Neal, though, is interesting to me. I thought Neal, Nate and Charles and I talked about him on 301 a little bit. I thought he was a guy during the draft process. So he was a guy that, had some good, solid skills as like a technically sound runner, just wasn't very exciting at all. But again, it is the Saints. He's like the 3rd string back because Kendre Miller was ahead of him on the depth chart. So can't get overly excited, but certainly as somebody that maybe if you're desperate at running back could give you a few carries.
Does everything pretty well, but kind of no like one exceptional trait that's going to set him apart from everyone. But yeah, I agree. I also liked him coming out, and when he started to fall down the depth chart, that's when I got concerned and even dropped him in one Dynasty league, which I regret now, because you want to carry those backups, especially in Dynasty where you can get those cheap starts, and I wish I still had him. Let's keep moving here to receiver. The 4 guys that I want to talk about here: Christian Watson at the Lions, Jaden Higgins at the Colts, Parker Washington at the Titans, and Shamiri DK versus the Jags this week. Talk about it every single week, right? You can get these guys who are like wide receiver 3 flex, wide receiver 4 flex types. All these guys fit into that category. I think the 2 most interesting ones are Watson, who, another solid but unspectacular week from him. He had that really big blow-up game a couple weeks ago with the 2 touchdowns, but at least 45 yards in all 5 of his games since returning to the lineup here. We know he has that spiked week potential with big plays and touchdowns, so definitely somebody that you can grab and throw into your lineup and hope that you hit on one of those boom weeks. And so far right now, he's showing a pretty good floor as well. So really like him, even though he's right up near that 50% rostered mark. Higgins is the one that I kind of want to hear what you have to say here, Harmon, because he's been a top 36 fantasy receiver in 4 of his last 5 outings. We liked him before the year. He really didn't get the opportunity early. Now it seems like it's finally coming. He stepped into that number 2 wideout role in this offense, and hopefully we can get CJ Stroud back under center. I think this is a spot where he's a wide receiver 3 flex option, but maybe could there be more for him in this offense if they can get this thing going a little bit better down the stretch here? And it's funny that, he had some decent performances with Davis Mills, and now we're going, man, I hope CJ Stroud can get out there and have the same kind of thing, but he's getting opportunity and he's done something with it. So could we see a little more from a rookie like him down the stretch?
I think it's very possible. Talked about this on the Thursday night solo recap. People can go back and check that out. But I think that the Texans they're starting to use him more and more in the ways I'd like to see. He was a prospect that I did not think would be able to work in the X receiver role, which obviously the Texans have Nico Collins. He's their X receiver. I'd still like to see those guys mix and match a little bit more so that we can get Nico some free releases and he can get some more layup targets. But it's more important. Like, Nico can win at X. I think Higgins needs to be off ball. He needs to be in the slot. I think all of his touchdowns, or a good majority of his touchdowns this year, have actually come when he's lined up in the slot. So that to me it's been good to see that, right? That they understand, okay, he is somebody that needs certain role catering, off the ball, slot receiver work. Yeah. 3 of his 4 touchdowns this year have come when he's lined up in the slot. So they've gotten him some right opportunities there. Again, they're moving him around pre-snap. I liked the usage, what I saw on Thursday night for Higgins. So not a perfect player. I think he needs to grow in some areas. Some of his routes can be a little tighter. Some of his technique can be a little bit more detailed. His overall separation does need to be better than what it's been so far, but he looks like he's quietly trending in the right direction to me. So I think he could be one of those rookie receivers that maybe doesn't end the year as a every week fantasy starter, but ticks up the right direction at the end of the year.
Well, like I said, a bunch of top 36 finishes recently, right? So that puts him in that wide receiver 3 flex kind of mix. And you just hope that a rookie potentially could keep building down the stretch here. But I think that's a great breakdown from you. Let's go to tight ends next. A lot of similar names that we've seen week in and week out here. Colston Loveland at the Eagles, not a great matchup, but you mentioned it earlier in the show. He's been producing. He looks fantastic. So maybe you don't want to play him this week, or at least think about this matchup and whether you have a better option, but definitely somebody that you could look to be starting the rest of the way as a low-end tight end 1. Brenton Strange at the Titans. He comes back this week. Again, doesn't find the end zone. That's kind of like the thing with him. He's been putting up decent yardage when he's been healthy, but he just doesn't really put up a ton of touchdowns. And yet 93 yards on 5 receptions is great production, was really making his presence felt. And he's also in that low-end tight end 1, high-end tight end 2 range for fantasy. Harold Fannin Jr., not much needs to be said. He's on this list like every single week. He's more in the tight end 2 streamer range because of the quarterback situation. I think the talent is certainly there, but we're not seeing like big blow-up games for him. So you're just playing him as an injury or bye week replacement. The really interesting one here, though, is Darren Waller potentially coming back. They've opened up his 21-day practice window. He could come off IR. He's only 20% rostered. And you look at what he did before, right? Like caught at least 1 touchdown in his 3 first games with the Dolphins. Then he gets hurt in the 4th. We haven't seen him since, but they're opening his practice window. He could come back. You look at the matchups. Their schedule is one of the easiest for fantasy tight ends. The Saints, the Jets, the Steelers, and the Bengals over the next month. So I think he should be picked up everywhere. We could see him get into that conversation as a low-end tight end 1 as well with that kind of touchdown upside. I don't know if you have thoughts on any of those guys, because a lot of those names we've seen over and over here every week, Harmon. So maybe I could just go right to my deep stashes, because I got a few that I want to mention this week, more than normal.
I would just say really quickly, I like Strange a lot. I think he can be a low-end tight end 1. Good call on Darren Waller in the schedule. Colston Loveland, I think, is a guy, at least on one of my really good fantasy teams. I'm just starting every week and seeing what happens. I did pick up Brenton Strange ahead of last week, so I think those two will be interesting to weigh this week. But for the most part, really like what I've seen from Colston Loveland. But let's get into your deep stashes here, because there's some interesting names.
Normally I only mention one guy, but this week I thought there was enough that we should mention a few. One is not really a deep stash, but we have to bring him up here. Jayden Reed, he's 36% rostered, but we know what he can do. We've seen him produce as a fantasy wide receiver 1 for stretches in the past. Very volatile in that Packers offense where they spread the ball around, but he could be coming back soon. So if he's on the waiver wire, stash him. And if you want to look actually deep, John Mechie, only 1% rostered on the Jets now. Adonai Mitchell, my guy, 2% roster. These guys are available basically everywhere. They are playing like the top 2 receivers in that Jets offense. This week, decent games, right? 6 for 65 from Mechie, 2 for 42 from Adonai Mitchell, who just got there a few weeks ago. So I think these guys could go on to really do something. We don't have Garrett Wilson back yet. We don't even know if Garrett Wilson is going to come back this year. So you could play these guys in a pinch because, like I said, they are available pretty much everywhere.
And they're better than some of the other options they rolled out this season. And they're young guys.
Definitely.
Mechie's still a young player. Obviously missed his whole first season due to leukemia. So, he's a guy worth rooting for. Mitchell is definitely young, and they got to see what they have there. And you could see more of it with Tyrod Taylor. So I like those two calls if you're desperate at wide receiver. And yeah, Jayden Reed, this team misses him so much. I know he's coming off injury, and I know they never play him as a full-time guy. But my God, they need to, okay? Like they need to make that happen when he gets back, because he is so missed on this team right now. Boone, this was a packed freaking show. We covered so much ground. Tell the people where they can find the rest of your waiver wire recommendations if they missed it here.
Yeah, my weekly column goes up on Monday afternoon, so they can go check that out. And it's not just the guys we talked about. There's a ton of players below that they can go see, broken all down into categories for every type of league out there. So go check that out.
Love it. All right, great episode with Boone. You're going to be back later in the week, sooner than usual, pal, because we've got a short week here with Thanksgiving coming up. But for tomorrow,
Absolutely.
Ray Garvin is going to join me on the show for a special edition of the pod. Not our usual Data Dump show. We're just going to preview the Thanksgiving and Black Friday slate of games so you can get an early start on those. That's going to be live right here, 5 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. Until then, we are out.